We've started an R Markdown file. Right now it only has Markdown in it. We haven't added any R yet. And we've written our own code using the render function from R Markdown to render this R Markdown document into an HTML document located in the incremental folder of our pipeline. That's one of the benefits of rendering it ourselves, and that we can tell it exactly where the output goes once we render it. Now we can start talking about how we start embedding our code into the Markdown to automate some of the content of our report. The first example I want to give is perhaps we want to add the system time to the report so that you can tell when the report was last rendered or when it was last compiled. Now it'd be we could add that manually. I could just type in the date here at the end of the file, whatever the date is, but then I would have to update that every time I rendered it and do that manually. That would be kind of a pain, and I'd probably forget to do it. But I can have the computer do it for me based on how our Markdown works. So there's two different ways we can do this, and we're going to go through both of them. But the first one we're going to try is inline R code. And the way you specify inline R code in R Markdown is with a single backwards apostrophe. On most keyboards, that's in the very upper left next to the 1. Then the letter R. And then in RStudio, typically the closed backwards apostrophe to say the end of the inline code should automatically pop up when you do that. RStudio knows that you're trying to put in inline R code here, and it will automatically pop in that backwards apostrophe. Now, any code that I type in here before this last backwards apostrophe is going to be R code that R Markdown will interpret, and it'll take whatever comes back from that R code and it will replace this inline R code with whatever comes back from the R code. So for example, if I want the system time to go in place of this inline R code, I would call the function R function sys.time here. Then R Markdown will go through this code, it'll find this inline R code, it'll run this systtime function, it'll take what comes back from this systtime function and it will replace the original R code, all of this, with the time that comes back from sys.time. So just to show you what sys.time generates, I'm going to call it here in my console. You can see I'm asking the operating system for the time, and right now it's May 15th, 2026, and it's about 1 o'clock Montana Daylight Savings Time, or sorry, Mountain Daylight Savings Time, though I am in Montana. So that is how we can get the systtime into our report automatically without us having to update it manually. Now I might just want to add some words around that to specify what this is all about, in which case I might want to add the text, this report was rendered by R Markdown on, and then this will get replaced with the time, and that would be the end of the sentence. So this is all just Markdown. And R Markdown doesn't care about that. It's just going to ignore that when it's trying to find the R code. But it's going to be there in the report in terms of describing what this time means in the report. One more thing I can do here, I just really want this to be an aside or a note at the end of the report. And I can also use different formatting codes from Markdown to make this text formatted how I want it. So I want this to be in italics. So I'm going to put a single asterisk on either side because everything in between a single asterisk, R Markdown is going to interpret as something that should be italicized in the final report. Okay, so let's make sure this all works. I'm going to save my RMD file. I'm going to go to my processing script. I'm going to run it. It's finished running. I'll click on Processing Notes and View in Web Browser. And this is what came up. I now have this note at the end of my report saying this report was rendered by R Markdown on the current date that automatically gets populated. There are some aspects of how this time shows up in the report that may not be very human readable. It looks like it has turned the seconds of the time into some sort of decimal number to fractions of a second, And that's really a much more resolution than we need. And it also just kind of makes that time hard to read. You might not even recognize that as a time. Even the date is a little hard to read because people may not be used to looking at the date in this type of format. So hopefully there's some way that we can rearrange the formatting of the time that we get back from sys.time to make it a little bit nicer to read as part of our report. I'm going to minimize that and go back to our code. So here's our Rmarkdown, and here's where we call systime. And a function we're going to use to reformat the sys.time is the format.posicct function. And I can do a help on format.posicct to show you how this function works. Basically, you just need to give it the thing that you want to convert, in which case it's what's coming back from systime, and then the format you want to convert it to. There's other options, but we're not going to need those at this time. So let's talk about how format works. If I use format.posicct and I specify the systime as what I want to convert, so I'm calling the function systime and I'm passing what's coming back from systime to the x argument of format.posicct, I can give it a format argument that will tell it how to reform it. Now, a format is just a string, and the string has various keys or various special characters that you can use to specify different aspects of the space-time that you want to show up in the formatted result. And those should be included in the help for format posicct. You've got all of these %A's, %B, %B, %C, etc. And these are all different codes you can use for inserting different part of the date time into the string that you want format to return. So it's easier to demonstrate than to explain. So let's talk about how to build one of these. So a format that I like is, I want to put the day first, and to insert a day in the string, I can use a %E, and that's right here. And that's the day of the month as a decimal number with a leading space for a single digit number. That means if it's 1, it's not going to show up as 01, it's just going to show up as a 1. Then I can put in capital B, that's the full month name, capital B, %B, that's the full month name. A capital Y is a 4-digit year. A capital H is hours in a 24-hour clock. I generally prefer a 24-hour clock. It's easier than dealing with AM, PM. And then a colon in between my hours and a %H for minutes. So the colon is just a character. It's just going to show up in the string. But these are the parts of time that are going to be inserted in the string. In this case, %M is the minutes of the hour. So let's see what that looks like. I've got 15 May 2026, day, month, year. That's kind of the European way of doing things. And 1314 is the time, which is 1:14 p.m. right now in the afternoon. Again, I prefer a 24-hour clock. So this might be a much more cleanly formatted time that more people are going to recognize to put into our report. That means that I can just take this R code that I've just tested in the console, and I can replace this systime with that code. Now, one thing that's going to happen is now my code has gotten pretty long, and you can see I'm starting to wrap the text around. And I like to keep narrow code. Even if it's markdown code, I like to keep it narrow. So I am going to add some new lines to keep this more narrow. But I still want everything to be in italics, so I'll need to add some more asterisks so that I have italicized. This report was rendered by Rmarkdown on close italics and then open italics again, the rest of this. And remember this carriage return here and this extra space is not going to matter to Rmarkdown. It's a formatting language, and it just takes the text as it is, and it's going to ignore that kind of extra white space in a paragraph. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to save my RMD file, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to run my processing script that is going to render the document. I'm going to bring back my web browser that's looking at my processing notes file, and I'm going to refresh. And now you can see we fixed that format. It's a much cleaner time format, 15 May 2026 and 1316.